Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on In Conversation, a new program we are developing here at Dominicans Love Haitians movement, discussing politics, art, Latinidad, and Negritude. Dominicans Love Haitians movement is celebrating the beauty of our commonalities to forge a future free from tyranny. We are a nonprofit agency using art as a foundational tool to unlearn racism and heal from 500 plus years of Eurocentrism. Today with us, we have Roberto Carlos Garcia. He is a poet, essayist, and storyteller, and he is self-described sancocho of provisions from the Harlem Renaissance, the Spanish poets of 1929, the Black arts movement, the Nuyorican School, and the Modernists. Garcia is rigorously interrogative of himself and the world around him, conveying nakedness of emotions, intent, and experience, and he writes extensively about the Afro-Latinx and Afro-diasporic experience. He is founder of the cooperative press Get Fresh Books Publishing, a nonprofit corp, and a native New Yorker. Roberto holds an MFA in poetry and in poetry in translation from Drew University, and he has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. So welcome, Roberto, here to In Conversation. We're so happy to have you.
What's up? What's up? Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure always.
Yes, and we're so happy that we figured some things out today. But let's see. We'll see. Let's see what's happening. So we wanted to have a conversation with you about the first time that we actually met, right? Because the first time we met was in 2016. And we were in that moment, we were actually kind of setting up Dominicans Love Haitians movement. We were doing the work. So, you know, the work started in 2009, right? But we finally we're in the process of initiating. And then in 2016, we finally were like, February 2016, we're gonna have this event. And so leading up to that, we were looking for Haitians, and we were looking for Dominican people. And unfortunately, at that period in our life, we didn't know that many Dominicans actually. So we grew up culturally Dominican. we grew up culturally Dominican. I mean, it was like, other than family, you know, you have family. Family doesn't really count because you're born into them, right? But outside of family, we were like, we could literally count on our hands like how many Dominicans we know, or we know. We grew up primarily in the Bronx. As we love to say, we grew up in the Bronx when it was burning. And during that time in the 70s and 80s, there weren't that many Dominicans. And so who we engaged with and interacted with were, you know, other people other than Dominicans. And our sister moved to Washington Heights, our older sister. So, you know, when we would go visit, that's when we were like immersed, so to speak, in like seeing the Dominican diaspora here. But it wasn't where we were located. And so here, fast forward to 2016, and we're like, don't know that many people. We literally were in search of, like, it was like, who are these Dominicans who are kind of like-minded in some respect, right? Because here we are, because there were those, when we were talking to some Dominicans leading up to this, there were those who were like, that shit's never gonna happen. I mean, you know, like, that's not gonna happen. Oh, that's a nice dream, but that's, you know, Dominican Haitians movement. And so we were like, who are our Dominicans out there who are, you know, who are thinking like we're thinking? And and who are artists, right? Who are immersed in the world of art and activism, and using their art as a means to like really kind of conjure up a new world, kind of disclose what it is happening amongst us. And so when we found your article on Gawker, it was just like, oh, it was like a celebration. We were like, oh, there are people out there like who see this world the way that we see it. And through our travels, we have come to learn that there are many more of us out here, right? But it didn't feel that way in the beginning. And so we wanted to like ask you why, like, why did you write that article? Literally hiding Black behind the ears on Dominicans, Blackness, and Haiti. Like, what was the impetus or what set you up to wanting to write that article?
A couple things. So yes, it was so dope. When you reached out to me, it was like, what a blessing, you know what I mean? To be like, yes, I'm down 100,000%, because the impetus for me was what was going on in DR with La Sentencia. And the horror and pain I felt watching those YouTube videos of what was being done to our Haitian brothers and sisters in the name of La Sentencia. Also, I had, Black Maybe, this book was, still in its, it was developed, but it still needed something, right? And I remember thinking to myself, I got to look at my history and our history. Like you, the Dominicans I knew were family, but, I grew up in communities that were, African-American, Haitian, Cuban, Colombian, Puerto Rican. I was the Dominican, okay, whatever, right? Come on, you could get down, you know what I mean? It was like the United Nations. So that also, hearing from other people, like the type of shit that Dominicans we bring to the table sometimes that leave people kind of scratching their heads, really helped me to explore it. So the impetus for it was to respond definitely to La Sentencia and what was happening, to speak to fellow Dominican Americans who were like, what's going on? Like, what is this? Wait, I thought, who were like you, like you and I, right? Awoke to our Afro-descendencia and really awoke to an identity that is not catering, a cis hetero-European patriarchy, an identity, because a lot of times the Latin identity, the Latino identity is in service of that European patriarchal idea. And so I said, I gotta do this. I gotta write the story. I gotta tell this experience. And the thing that was so fascinating to me was the reaction that I got. So many people with similar experiences, so many people who could connect to the story of, growing up, recognizing your Blackness and your Afro-descendedness in the face of a family that does not want to accept or recognize it. Across the entire culture, people had those stories, not just in the Spanish-speaking Caribbean, but in the, Francophone and Anglophone speaking Caribbean, people had those same experiences. The ideas of colorism, all of that stuff came up, right? And in my mind, Claribel, the fact that your movement, what you're doing with Dominicans Love Haitians, the fact that Black Maybe was like that, this is not front and center in like the New York Times, that this is not front and center in like outlets that will help us kind of reach a broader audience, speaks to how fearful certain elements are of that interrogation and of that conversation. you know, that they would love to just silence it and not let it see the light of day.
Yeah, we know firsthand of what that silencing looks like.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
We know firsthand what that silencing looks like. Fortunately and unfortunately, right? And also we recognize that one of the impetus behind these in conversation is because, you know, it was heavily in 2015 at that point, because it was 2013 when it was passed, but it wasn't immediately initiated until like 2015, 2016, right? La Sentencia, like they were still working things out. So, but as soon as then it was like finalized, we're going to be doing this, then the media was constantly like, you know, pushing it out there, talking about it, having in-depth discussions. And then like media does, they move on.
Yeah.
The media moves on, but the people who are impacted and affected are still living it on a day-to-day basis. And then it becomes, well, what is our duty to actually supporting those who are experiencing this constant horror day by day? It's like one of the things when in 2009 and we went, and in discovering that we needed to do something about this because of a personal incident, and then reading and being like, oh, this thing is, they're setting this up. Like we could see that they were setting this up to do this, right? It was obvious, like they were making it very difficult for Dominicans of Haitian descent to even receive identification for their children born here, or them, or, you know, there was just all these little things that were happening, like that you can, you know, it wouldn't take somebody, it's not, you could just literally in reading being like, oh, it's, they're making it a problem.
The writing was on the wall. Yeah.
It was very obvious for anybody who was looking, right? And and also knowing and then during that point we did our due diligence history and was like, oh, you know, this has been set up since, you know, Trujillo. Oh, of course, you know, it's in the language, it's in the laws. And he set that up for it purposely, right? And so so it was very refreshing to meet someone, right? And to refreshing to be like, oh, we're not the only one who sees this as this level of injustice, and that they're speaking out against it, and that, you know, here that you're still doing, and that you're looking at it from this internal, like, this is our life, right? This is what we've struggled with. And it was funny in reading Black Maybe, we were like, yo, this is our life story. Yeah. We were like, oh, this sounds just like, you know, the thing that we grew up with. Like growing up, people would be like, where are you from? And then we'd be like, Dominican. And then they'd be like, oh, Puerto Rico.
Right. Like,
and we would be like,
hear what you just said. Yeah.
They'll be like, or then we go like, oh, the other island, like Puerto Rico. Or, and it'd just be like, you know, as a child, it was like, what we were like, what, eight, 7, 9, and it'd be like, not really. It's not other. Is that? It's just like, it was such a weird encounter, and being reminded, like, you took us back, and we were like, yes, that experience, and one of that experience, and also that experience of, in some respect, there are those of us, we know, like, Black is not a monolith, right? Like our Blackness and our Negritude is not a monolith. They're like, what our experience is. So we always reference, we grew up here in New York City. Like our reference is based on New York City, like, right? And it's totally different from somebody who was raised maybe in Colorado or in California, or, you know, in the islands. It's like, because of how we grew up, right? And one of the things that we wanted to ask you or to talk about is that when did you know you were Black? You know, being Dominican, when did you recognize your Blackness?
You know, it's like,
did you know from day one, or?
Yeah,
did you?
Where I knew was very early on, because, you know, like I said, for me, it was always, we always lived in communities that were diverse, but that were predominantly African-American. And so if I had friends that were not African-American, you know, early in my experience, that was a different thing for me to have friends that were like visibly Latino, you know? It wasn't until I moved to a certain neighborhood where I met some of the friends that would be my friends like for life, you know, that had different phenotypes or whatever. But I've always known. I think I've known for as long as I could remember. I've always known, you know? Now, where, I guess the when or the moment when I decided like, okay, I need to really understand this, because all these different experiences, all these different people are coming at me from all these different perspectives about this. Or you're not Black, or, you know, you're this, you think you're Black, or I don't know what you're talking about. You Black, you're not like us, da da da. Or that I said, okay, I need to like, what's wrong with all of y'all? Because I know I'm not crazy, right? Was really like when I was maybe like my first time in college that I was like, I read this book called Everything You Need to Know About Latino History, right? And it was interesting because it kind of touched on African slavery in the Caribbean and in the larger Americas. And it touched on, you know, what was done to the indigenous folks. So it kind of like, it was like a little flashlight mixed in there with this big conversation on mestizaje or whatever. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to learn more about this. You know, I need to learn more about what is it that's going on with people and their stupidity and this fucking racism. Like, and that was it. And from there, I just kept jumping to you know, different books, different ideas. And you know, it to me, it still to this day baffles my mind at the reaction you even get from people just when you say, yeah, I'm Black. You know what I mean? That causes controversy to me is like, it says all we need to know, obviously, but I can never get used to people's reactions to that, because I think that would mean that I'm maybe getting desensitized or something, right? Because they're the ridiculous ones to take it as such an outrageous thing to just say, you know, hey, I'm Black, I'm Afro-descendiente. And I'm proud of that. And I understand what that history is. And we got to get to a moment where we are all good with ourselves so we can get free, right? Because we got to get free. And so, yeah, you know, for as long as I can remember, there's even a part in that essay, right? Because that essay became the title essay for the book, like maybe at the end of the book, right? There's even that part where I'm like, wait a minute, what's wrong with the picture, right? Like, what's going on? Why are they telling me this and that when we're both these chocolate brown boys? I don't understand what you're even talking about. Like,
that was the part that got, you know, you first started with Billy, right? And that your grandmother was okay with, you can go, oh, you can't, his mom was like, you ain't going over that to that Negro's house.
Right.
But your grandmother was like, you can go over there. But as soon as Billy left the neighborhood and your other friend came, then your grandmother was like, you ain't going over there. Then that's when it was just like, oh, how soon things, you know, turn.
How they change, right? It's true.
How somebody's Blackness becomes unacceptable. And how is that? Like, what is that about?
And that would be a recurring...
So did you ever get cleared up with your grandmother?
Yes. It's funny, right? Because my friend, you know, Ty, we grew up like brothers. There's no other way to say it. And he became a member of the family, like, you know what I'm saying? But it's, I mean, I'll never try to justify where those ideas come from our elders, right? Because there's no justifying it. There's only staying resilient in the face of it. You know what I mean? Like, as a kid, some kids, they'd be like, okay, mommy, you know, boom, and they're racist too, done. And there's a whole nother generation gone that's like, I don't fuck with black people. Like, you know, even though pares un calvón, like, and you like, I don't fuck with black people, right? But there's people who do that shit. There's kids who just go along with it, and that's how this shit keeps going. For me, even at a young age, it was very important to be able to say, and you know, I don't ever want people to get it twisted. You know, I love my grandmother to the heavens and back. You know what I mean? She sacrificed a lot to raise me. All of that being said, she wasn't perfect. We know, right? That your parents can love you, but that doesn't mean they're perfect. And so it was very important to me, even at that young age, to push back against that and be like, whoa, wait a minute. You darker than all of us. What are you talking about? Like, it was very important for me to keep pushing back until it was just recognized that this is it. This is what it is. You have no say in this friendship. You have no say in this relationship. Or even like, you know, I recognize who I am, you know? And I get into a lot of it, like, I guess, how growing up, because man, she lived throughout the height of that whole fucking dictatorship and never really talked about it ever. When I read the research about what it was like to live under that dictatorship, like, I'm just stunned that all the people I knew, they that lived through it, or the relatives, the tios and the cousins, that they just never talked about it. They came here and was like, zip, zip. They don't say nothing about it. It's amazing to me. And those folks are dying. They're dying off. So to be like eyewitness account, right? First person eyewitness account. Eso se acabó almost, right? So in any event, it was always very important to me to always push back. And my aunt, she experienced a lot of that too. You know, she had black boyfriends, and you know, she hung out with her group of friends, and you know, my grandmother wasn't with that either, but I guess I had like a good example, you know what I mean, of how to push back. And yeah.
So we're just laughing at the idea that your aunt was like, peace, we doing what we doing.
Yeah.
And probably you looked up to her and was just like, yeah, that's the way to do it too. You were like, this is the way to go about it, because otherwise.
Think about, I always say, right, and a lot of times when I talk to my students, I tell them this, in particular, like if they are, you know, if they're Latinx or whatever, and they're like, they're venting in the class about their own parents' racism, right? Because we read about all this stuff in the class too. And I always say, I said, you know, you take colonialism and what that created, and it's like a sci-fi when you go to Spanish-speaking countries, in a sense. It's like sci-fi because everybody is so caught up in their struggle to survive, but they have this love of their land, right? Anywhere you go, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Cuba, people, you know, to the hilt, they're like, oh, que yo soy colombiano, oh, you know, I'm Cuban, I'm Puerto Rican. They got this pride in their place, right? But then when you really get to, okay, the understanding of the place, not blanket, but in large part, you get to an understanding of the colonial history and what does this new identity really mean? What does this new Colombian, Cuban, Puerto Rican, Dominican identity really mean? Like, how much of it is a free identity, or how much of it is a constructed identity to keep you enslaved, right? It's hard to break. You take that type of mindset, a colonial mindset, even, let's say, and then you bring it to America, where there's a whole nother narrative taking shape. It never surprises me how easily a lot of Latino immigrants come here and fall right in line with the racist narrative and just very comfortably take up that mantle and perpetuate racisms and forms of discrimination that they themselves are going to suffer from. But, you know, they think that as long as they play ball that way, they're going to be okay. You know, I got to give a talk next month. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is my grandmother and my aunts, they loved, my older aunts, they loved Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan would come on and they would be like, Ronald Reagan, míralo, míralo. Right? You know, look, you dip in your head because you know. Meanwhile, this motherfucker hated poor people like crazy. He was, so just imagine, why did so many immigrants love Reagan? Because, okay, he paved the path for a lot of immigrants who came here illegally to then get documentation and bring their families over. But for the folks who were already here, struggling in poverty, he was blowtorching everybody, right? So it's such a, and there's no other way for me to say it. I always say this and people laugh, it's such a mind fuck. You know what I mean? That people don't, that sometimes these contradictions and this stuff, it's just wild to me, you know, how I guess little people can understand about even their own experiences, that when they're thrown into the US, it becomes complicated. Because one of the things I keep thinking about, you know, Claribel, is, okay, how do we get free, right? Because like you said, the superstructure in DR is set up. All the influence that Trujillo had with the racism and the stuff, that superstructure is still there. It's still taught in the schools, so that those kids are still instructed to hate their Haitian brothers and sisters, in a sense, right? Generation after generation after generation.
There's no real, so like, just like here in the United States, the educational system is created so that is, embedded into it. You're not disclosing the real truth, or you're not giving the wealth of knowledge that there is, the wealth of real, understanding history of what took place. It's the same difference. It's happening there.
Exactly. So in order to, like, I'm gonna take it to the Matrix, DK. In order to free those minds, right? We gotta find a way to, and this is where I love the mission you have, that through art to do this. We gotta get either the books, the movies, the art pieces, the whatever, into the conversation, into the stream, to just wake those minds up. You know what I mean? To free those minds, because it's crazy.
Honestly, you were talking about, people, your aunts and your grandmother loving, these immigrants, Caribbean immigrants, whomever, like loving Reagan, but that's the mind fuck of that. But that's the exact experience that we're having currently with, with these with what they're called, with these Latinos for Trump, right? And Proud Boys. When we found out homeboy was Afro-Cuban, we were just like, okay, again, it literally was just like, okay, we felt our brain being like, like we like, wait. So it's like we're going, it was just like, we can't even, in this moment, we literally was like, we have no capacity with all that has happened in 2020 for us to even take on what this looks like, a deeper understanding. We were like, well, there's only so much that our brain can take and our hearts can take right now. And we were like, we're going to have to put this one to the side and pick it up maybe in 2021.
Or just leave.
Because, or just leave it alone. Because it was just like, how could you possibly be behind somebody who had it, with every ounce of his fiber, it's like it's coming through, like coming out of his pores, how much he despises immigrants. If you're an immigrant, if you're black, you're everything other. If you're not white, he doesn't like you. And that the only reason why he would say that he likes you is for the numbers, not because honestly he likes you, only for the numbers and for the play. And that you would literally take, like accept the vomit, actually the vomit that was being thrown, and eating it like it was delicious. And we couldn't understand that. We couldn't understand, like, how can you not see through this type of person and everything that he has communicated to you from the beginning, like and then the actions as well, the actions that this person has taken. It was just like, we were really baffled. It's like, we don't even have the word for what we were experiencing. And to see that it's something that, you're talking about Reagan in the 80s, and here we are 2020, and that's still kind of, like this wanting to distance. And we understand that this is part of the whole racialized system, right? That you as someone who's Black, but there are those who come, right, who are like, well, we're not Black like them, right? We're not Black like that. The wanting to distance yourself from what from the group that's at the bottom. And and here we are, we're all Black people, but there are Black people who are at the bottom, right? There are levels of all of this hierarchy that exists, and there are those who come who are like, well, we're not like that, which is of course many African Americans are in conversation around that, being like, that they're seen as the lowest of the low, and that system is perpetuated by those who want to who will do that, whether it through language. We speak Spanish, so that means we're somehow different.
Yes.
Or meanwhile, it's like that's colonized. Right.
Or through money.
Right, or through money, and yet at the same time, it's like, ain't no police officer gonna be asking you. ain't no medical person gonna be asking, are you this type of Black person? No, they're not. They see you, and immediately they're gonna treat you as they will. How inside of this system, they will treat you as any other Black person.
Yeah, the war that
Bronx, that was our experience.
Say again?
You're gonna say? I said, and growing up in the Bronx, we were very clear we were Black.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. It's amazing, like how psychological the war it really is, when you just break it down. This wanting to, and what trips me up is that there's like this whole thing called whiteness studies, right? And thinking about whiteness as an identity that not just European descended people have, but I often like to think of it as an identity that's tied to power, because, as James Baldwin so eloquently said, there is no aspect of white identity that's not, or the claim to whiteness that's not tied to power, to money and power. And that's a very attractive thing to people trying to run from reality, and that's what we see is, our own peoples running from reality, and having totally embraced, a capitalistic patriarchal system and wanting its acceptance and approval.
But don't you think that it was already there?
That what was already there?
That patriarchy, that racialized system was already there and it just got augmented.
It's always been there
for those who came.
Yes, definitely. And what I'm saying is, whether it's in 2020 or whether it was in 1930, 1940, 1950, or 1960, when you were talking about this Afro-Cuban brother who was a proud boy and who's like all in with these folks, right? And how even within the whole Afro-diasporic, right? Whether you be Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latinx, African-American, it doesn't matter. There's the layers of Blackness, and within our Afro-diasporic communities, you have folks who even believe that they are fighting in the struggle for freedom, but they're okay fighting in the struggle for freedom within the capitalist patriarchal system, because what they want is to be on equal standing then with the white man in this system. There's people fighting the liberation struggle on that tip, right? And a lot of these jokers who are for, this, we say this Trump movement today, but we know what it is, white supremacy, or white racism, a lot of these folks maybe they see an avenue where if they, play along, they will finally get on that level. You know what I mean? Again, it's so psychological, and it always has been. Creating this separation and division, and couching it in, oh well, they don't believe in freedom, they're communists, they want to take away your rights, they want to do this, they want to do that. Okay, but if there's so much freedom and so much opportunity, why is the situation what it is, right? That's bullshit. But again, the war that's being waged on us, there's a physical aspect. Yes, we are murdered in the streets, we're starved in our neighborhoods, right? We're denied opportunities, over incarcerated, the whole thing. But it starts in here so much of the time. That like this is I say like this should be, I guess, our target, because you got to get free up here before anywhere else,
It's one of those like how should I say, it's a difficult proposition, because there's that part of understanding that, because we think back about what you said about your grandmother and your family members who lived through Trujillo, right, and who refused to talk about it, and that now there are many of those who are passing on, and so, and what we think about are all of those who are now creating this new mythology around Trujillo, acting as if what he did was something great. That he's like this national symbol for what Dominicanness is, for some people.
Yeah.
For some people, right?
Which is astonishing. Like, it's astonishing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Please finish your thought. Sorry.
No, it's the same thing. Like, these Proud Boys. We're just like, what is going on? What do you know? Have you picked up some books lately? Like, what is it that what is it that you're thinking? What do you think that this is? Why do you think the way that you think? We really actually were very much interested in like, why do you think what you think? Because there are those who is like, it's nationalism, but at the same time it's like, but wait, how can you say that it's nationalism?
It's worse than that.
And yet
fascism.
It's like, it's fascism. It's not nationalism, it's fascism. And definitely it is. And also, and what we know, like that liberation starts in the mind, but at what point do you get at what point is it where somebody all of a sudden like realizes, oh wait, what we're thinking in a way that maybe doesn't behoove us, or doesn't support our family member, or doesn't support one of the things. So we were reading the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, and she starts off her book with this image of in Nazi Germany, where there was the Reich, where they were holding not a parade, where they were holding like a conference, or like there were a multitude of people there, and there was this one gentleman who had his, everybody else had their hands up, like in Heil Hitler, and he had his hands crossed, and you could tell he was like, no, I'm not buying this. And one of the things that she then dives into is the fact that he was in a relationship with a Jewish woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like, oh, okay, so that relationship really meant something to him, right? Like they were engaged, and here is this person speaking and literally saying, we're going to kill all these Jewish people, don't belong here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet he's in love with somebody, and so we're just like, what? So we sigh, because at the same time that there are those people that we know, like there are people who are like, I have family member who are Haitian.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they're still, you know, Proud Boys. They're still, you know, these fascists, you know, they're still, and so that is the thing that really confounds us, where it's just like, here is this book that says this relationship was really important, and this is what would, you know, this created this person saying, no, we reject this. And yet we know family members. We had somebody who was my mother's attendant, and yo, in the same breath, and we just sat back and was just like, do you even hear yourself? In the same breath that she had this young boy who she adopted. His parents were, you know, Haitian. He's of Haitian, Dominican, Haitian descent. His parents had to leave for whatever reasons. She adopted him. She would be sending them money, and yet in the same breath, then like denigrated, you know, Haitian people. Like literally, we have this son. He's Haitian, and then in the same breath, like was bad mouthing Haitian people, and we just sat there listening, and just like, how is it possible? You're raising a child, and the way that you speak, you know this person is, and yet you still carry this internalized thought that, you know, and it really was just like, we don't. I guess there was a part of just like, it doesn't even matter. Like, can we even understand your thinking process?
No, it's like we're lab rats. I feel like we're lab rats. One of the things I have conversations with my students about, you know, how we perpetuate our own oppressions, and we do that constantly. And that's why I say sometimes I feel like, you know, we're just lab rats, and we're out here like, I don't know, we just out here doing crazy shit, man. I wish I could. I often say this, and I sound really morbid, but I think about the few, like, if you think about like sci-fi movies, right? And this is one of the reasons why I've been trying to write more Afrofuturism, really trying to get into it, because I think that it's necessary, and the type of creative energy that it requires is, in my mind, maybe it's this hopeful, optimistic energy, right? Look how resilient we have been. We got more of that in us, and you know what I mean, right? But one of the reasons I kind of struggle with it is because, like, in sci-fi, before, you know, the human race can move on, right? There's this catastrophic event that wipes out most of us. And that
2020.
That facilitates, yeah, right? That facilitates, I guess, people with more common sense to prevail, I guess, and move us to the next level. But it's so morbid to think that that's what it's going to take, right? So I don't know. Sometimes I've been struggling with Afrofuturism for that reason. But I love it as a genre, and I really want to get into it. But when, you know, when we have these conversations and we see just how deep the rabbit hole goes for some of our brothers and sisters, right? It could be daunting to be a futurist, an Afrofuturist. It could be daunting. So, you know what? Big props and bless ups to all those brothers and sisters writing Afrofuturism, for real.
I think we have to be like Sun Ra. Sun Ra didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, right.
he was in outer space.
That's it.
He was already in outer space.
You know, 100.
I think that is actually
facts. You got it.
I think we have to come from a place of like, none of, you know, like, let us think even beyond what we think right now. Let us think beyond this, because this isn't it either. We know, you know, this system was made up. None of this is real. We love it. We would love it. Well, it was this love-hate relationship. So when we would go in and do these racial justice workshops in schools with, you know, predominantly white people. And one time there was this time when we went upstate, and it was scary because it was after the killing of after the church killing, and this man was trying to go into another church, and instead he killed 2 elderly Black people in in a store.
Oh my gosh.
And so we were, you know, this was in what? Yeah, this was in 2018. Yeah, 2018. And we were going up, and that's all that was playing out in our head. Like, you know, we have no idea. We're predominantly white school, 100 people, you don't know, solitary, just ourselves. We were with un compañera, where he was going to another school. So we drove up together, but we were by ourselves. And yeah, you know, principal and was, you know, there are people who were in alignment with the work that we were doing, but that don't mean nothing when you're in front of the room and you're having a conversation about race with a whole bunch of people who are like, no, we're not, you know, we're not the one, we're not the one, we're not racist. And you're like, yeah, okay, this is what this is. But, and of course, one of the women were like, my husband is Latino. And it was just like, yeah, and like, that doesn't mean anything, right? And so we had this conversation about, race is actually a construct that was created, right? Purposely. And literally, consonant dissonance. This woman was like, that's not true. That's not true. And that's not what it says in the dictionary. And that's not this and that's not that. And it was literally like, this is our understanding. Like, this is what it is. And of course, people always like to forget the whole part, because of course there's this place of people calling Black people racist, and it's just like, Black people can't be racist. Yeah, we could be discriminatory, we could be, you know, prejudicial, we could be bigoted, all those things, but we can't be racist because of that whole one piece, right? You don't got no power. As much as you may want to, you don't got no power. And so that is the canceling of that system. That's the place of going to work, right? And the struggle with those who come or who are here who want to get closer to that, right? As you were saying before, you want to get as close to power as possible, and whatever we need to do, we will. And so, what was our point? And so it's just like
this is all made up.
And to be like that. The whole idea of the Afro, that it's all made up, right? It's all made. So if it's all made up, we've been thinking about it. We're like, Scientology, that motherfucker made that up too.
Yeah,
they made that up. They made that up.
Yeah.
Why? And we, because we really do sit with that. We sit with that. And we're like, all these systems that were made up. We can too, and we should. We do need to. I think what we're sitting here being with you is being like, no, Afrofuturism doesn't have to be difficult, because it's all made up anyway. And there's no if you prescribe to saying that there's a script, then that will make it be like difficult.
Yeah.
But to recognize that there is no other than your greatest aspiration, then that's all that there is to sit with. To be like, what is the, we always, when we listen to our ancestors and we listen to the universe, like, they will tell us exactly what the story is.
Yeah.
And which is why we started Dominicans Love Haitians movement, because God help us, we wouldn't have done this on our own. If it wasn't for the ancestors and being like, mira, we've been following you for a long time. We've been trying to like hit you up, and you're not trying to listen. And finally it was just like, what? Like, don't you know, you've been asking, why are you doing this and why are you doing that? Why I gotta work here? Well, now you know. Now you know, and now you know we brought you here so that all of this is coming and sitting together. So Roberto, we say, that's how we say Sun Ra. We give a fuck. That's right. There are those who were like, we are gonna dream our biggest and greatest dream, inside of what we are creating. And dreams don't need to make sense, because that's the same system. That's the system that we're in now. Here. Yeah, that's the system now. So we have to do that work to liberate ourselves from that. And I think that's part of, in your book, for those of you who don't know, Roberto has 3 books, and we aren't able to get the 3rd book because the 3rd book just dropped. Right. Roberto, do you want to talk about your books a little bit, about your books, and we have a beautiful some of his books here,
dope.
and that's the latest.
Dope.
Okay,
That's
wait,
dope.
how fat is it? Let's see. That's a good. That's a good size.
It's twice the size of these, yeah, because these are thin. But
yeah,
we wrote a little bit more.
You've been doing the work.
So this book, you talking about listening to your ancestors. This book was like definitely a spiritual journey, where I just kind of had to, I guess, say hello and say goodbye, right? But also to venerate, and also to make certain things plain. So, there's a lot in this book, but in my mind, a friend of mine, she was saying, she read the book and she had made mention. She goes, I know they're elegies, but they also, when you read them, they sound like odes too, They sound like tributes to life and a life lived. So the book, 20 poems in the book are elegies to my grandmother, who passed away from Alzheimer's disease, and who was taken care of splendidly by my aunt, by the way, right? The same aunt that, was doing her thing and dating whoever she wanted to date and whatever, right? She took care of her like a gem, and, she was with us for a long time, even though she had Alzheimer's and didn't remember much. She was still wonderful. So the book, there's 20 elegies to her there, but there's also these odes and elegies, for all of it, the colonial mindset and odes to getting free and examinations of the cost. And, if you don't mind, I'd like to read a poem from the new book.
Absolutely, please.
Okay,
absolutely.
So this is a bit of a longer one. It's a bit of a longer. It's like in 4 parts. And I'll just read it. It's called The Cost. And this poem, I was having a conversation with my mentor when I was doing my MFA at Essayist. And she was like, there's such a cost for all of these things that you are, writing about, for all of us engaged in the struggle for freedom. What about that cost? And this poem came out of that idea, right? So the cost. 1. My Black folk believe we fell from grace. We fell walking the path, and bad language, philosophy, or faith brought the Europeans upon us. We paid a price we didn't decide. Now we know the cost. One night, singing in my sleep, I had a dream of a steady rocking like a metronome. In the dream, I felt a rough brown hand on my head and heard him sigh. I am Esteban, he said. I opened my mouth and candies fell out. An offering, cried Esteban. We begin. Half naked, in a filthy loincloth, I stood on a wooden deck, moldy mast, Portuguese flag stitched in the sail, entire ship in flames and sailing along. Esteban waved, come mulatto, see the first shore. Tree-dressed mountains, cotton clouds and blue skies, this island and so many like it, clear waters, pink sands. Our people dancing and drinking, dressed like lords, grinding each other to calypso, bachata, soca. Our flags, red and blue, black and red, yellow and green. Closer, sand choking on beer and tequila bottles, the bloody shackled feet of carnival dancers, resorts, shining pools of water in the hills. A white man posed on a flat green patch. I thought he waved at us. He was testing the wind, swung his golf club, wind-pressed t-shirt over his belly, all-inclusive in bold black letters. Esteban laughed a bitter laugh. The waters began to rise and rise. Hurricanes spun, a seascape. The carnival never stopped. Costumes and all, the storm dragged island folk off land. The resorts and white men golfing blew bubbles and sank to the depths without a sound. The water so clear you'd see Middle Passage dead at the bottom. What are my brothers and sisters thinking as they dance? After all the declarations of independence, decades pretending white government, white wigs and all. The European colonies exist unchanged in our minds. Esteban grabbed me by the neck and asked, "What do you see in the water?" 2. You are 16 and at a pool party. The girls are pretty. The party is a Latino party, but you know the drill. Your own family warns you against dating Black people. Yet, here you are, the only Black person at the party. Latino, yes, whatever that means, but Black. As the time to enter the pool approaches, gradually less and less friends engage you. You feel like a guest that's not being asked to leave, but you feel like a guest that's no longer wanted. The other kids start getting into the pool. No one is inviting you. No one is acknowledging you. Foolishly, you start speaking to people in Spanish. You are trying to prove something. No one is listening. You are ashamed of your desperation. Deep inside you, waters are crashing loudly. You leave the party and nobody notices. A few days later, at school, nobody asks how you liked the party. They talk about it as if you weren't even there, as if you hadn't been invited. Later, you'll learn about segregation and pools. The one drop rule, the one black toe in the water rule, across todas las Americas. You learn that DNA is genetic memory, just like water. You learn we paid a price we didn't decide. Now we know the cost. 3. My son asks why he's not brown like me. I have the other talk with him about passing and not being able to pass, and don't you even think about passing. Memory takes the moment. I'm running in the rain with friends. The rain stops against my hair, sits like cold wax on a wooden table. My afro is not grass laying under water's weight. Your hair is not soft like mine. You can't do this. The hand, a buffing pad, makes a shine, a lacquered lawn I want to torch. So I slap my friend in the name of that narrative. White is good, Black is bad, good hair, bad hair. You shall not pass. And I tell my son that. 4. I wanted to wake up. Esteban gave me a bottle of rum. Colonizers gave us these islands, little fiefdoms of diaspora, a trap. Colonizers really loved the weather, but in the end, we became intolerable. Now they rule us with banks. How long to make slaves into a kingdom again? Little islands, diaspora of Babel. And the more I drank, the more Esteban cried, and his tongue crawled out of his mouth, a great snake. Give me the bottle. Donne-moi la bouteille. Dame la botella. Give me the flesh. We paid a price we didn't decide. Now we know the cost. Thank you.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. That was beautiful. We have to admit that we were silly. We have to, Roberto, we muted ourselves because we were not thinking. And then as soon as we realized, we were like, oh, we muted you for everybody.
Oh no.
We unmuted. So there are those who didn't catch just the first couple of stanza where you opened it up with Esteban, the first line with Esteban. So we apologize for that, but we wanted to let you know about that. We were like, oh my God, what did we do? Oh, like there was a mira.
Yeah.
So we were like, oh my God, so used to like, the Zoom thing, like, you're not talking, mute yourself. But that was beautiful that you opened it up. Of course, clearly you opened it up with Eshu, Eshu, as we like to say, as part of the Santeria, as part of Ifa, Santeria, Eshu being and even in voodoo, you know, with Shu being that the spirit of communication and opening up the crossroads, and you always start with this spirit when you do any spiritual work. It is the first entity, the first energy that you open up with and you give offering to, so that your words are then are reached, that your words reach who the energy Olodumare, who they will reach in order for it to transpire for whatever it is that you're asking. Although sometimes the Shu can he's this energy is a very particular kind of energy as well, because they will how shall we say this, if you're not on the correct road, they will let you know.
Nice.
they will do the work of letting you know. You know, that's why they call him the trickster, kind of, because it's just like they will let you, you know, they fuss with you, they will set you up and be like, that's not the path, sweetie.
Yeah.
You want to keep staying, you're gonna be wondering why you're in so much trouble or things are not showing up in a particular way. So that was beautiful that you opened up with him, and that you gave libation, and the story that you told, you know, through the, because immediately when you're talking about the pool party, that's what came up for me. It was like, oh, you know, the 60s and what happened and the learning of that, and then equally what you tell your son. And of course now we know, you know, you have to tell your children things that you may not ever want to tell your children, right? And what that experience looks like, and to come back to, and that even, you know, that you always come back to spirit in the end. You always come back to spirit. You always come back to your ancestors. That was a beautiful.
Thank you. One of the goals with that poem is to try to tie in all of these things to experience, right? That what we see, you know, for example, that moment, that poem, that part of the poem about the pool is really to tie in how something that was a policy, not just in America, but across the Americas, because as we're all too familiar with, we know that within the superstructure, the power structure in Latin American countries was Euro descendants, right? And so that African and indigenous descendants in Latin America were not allowed into those spaces. They were domestics and servants. And so that this history cuts across the Americas of not being allowed to fully participate or engage, right? In just life, right? Even in that moment. But then also
think about,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that makes, we were saying that makes us think about all the resorts on the Caribbean, on the island, where you're not, you know, here you have these resorts owned by these European and, you know, whoever else, not by the people, right? And they're not allowed particular beaches. They're not allowed to swim in a particular section. And then also the towns are like run down. Meanwhile, the resorts are like beautiful, but what about the townships where these people are coming, you know, to work these resorts?
It's like driving through the hood to get to the White House. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to drive to the hood to get to the resort. And so, like, yeah, there's a lot of things that I want us to consider. I think, you know, as if we come to that poem, you know, how free, you know, none of these folks are free the way they think they're free. And I just hope that the poem kind of triggers some kind of thought process on that, you know, for sure.
Well, what like, you did have that conversation with your son though about, like,
yes,
when he asked?
I tell him, yeah, you know, it's funny because he's fair, right? In the summer, he gets like my complexion or darker, but beyond that, you know, él es blanquito. And so, you know, but he's got his fro, you know what I'm saying? He's got his fro, and it's funny because he looks like me, but just not dark. But I said to him, you know, I said, anyone will look at you and see me in you. And I said, you understand what that means? I said, you may not be brown, black like me, but they will see the brown and black within you by looking at you. You know, so you can never play that game. I said, there's people who play it. I said, but you know, you need to know. And yeah, that was a good conversation. There was more to it, but that's between me and him.
I'll be ready. We're not gonna go all into it. Yeah. But that is something though, that we are dealing with inside of what it looks like to be Afro-descendiente. And that's something that is, we don't want to call it a hot topic, but in some respect, a topic in the sense where there are many who, oh my God, this is so layered, right? It's just a layered conversation.
I saw a little video today and I shared it. I'm sorry. I saw a little video today and I shared it. I think Afro-Latin Diaspora shared it on Instagram. And the speaker in the video was like, okay, your father could be black, but you could not be visibly black. So you don't get to walk into a space where there are visibly black people and start throwing the N-word around and this and that if you are not visibly black, because when you are not in a visibly black space, you have a privilege of passing. And what you're doing is using that privilege to play both worlds. I saw that video and I was like, this is perfect. I wish I could have written this as a fucking poem, like, because it is very layered. It is very layered. One of the things I posted on my Instagram, because I just had to fuck with people, was like 2 white people. And I think I made the caption, Afro-Latinx, Afro-Latinx at work or whatever, because you get some people who are not visibly Afro-descendiente. And that's not to say it's not in their bloodline. We get it. But, come on, just utilize some common sense, utilize some understanding of what it is that's happening. You know what I'm saying? If you blonde and you pálida, but your dad is brown or whatever, hey, okay, I get it, but do you get it? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, it's layered. It's very layered, very layered.
I mean, like we said, that's a really difficult conversation because we know many people and non-Spanish speaking people, born here in this country, parents born here in this country, maybe one parent is not, but like one of your poems is the N-word, right? And there was this big uprising in, I say big because it really became like this really intense conversation. It was, I think in 2000, either 2008, 2009, where a lot of people were re-looking at the N-word and being like, yo, in our community, we need to stop using it. Like in our Black community, we need to stop using this word ourselves as well. And people were then really deep diving into the word. And, so growing up, we didn't use that word. But then when did we start using that word? We started using that word more often in our 20s because we met a friend of ours who was always throwing that word. Like that word was like the water, like, it, for him, it was like saying, air. He was just throwing it around to the point where then it's like, you start throwing it around because you're in that company, right? And you don't think nothing of it. And of course you say it with all the cariño, a veces cariño, a veces being insulting, you use it in every, you use it the way Dominicans use vaina, right?
Yes.
You use it for anything and everything. And we were around everybody, people who similarly were doing, were using it. And then all of a sudden there was this big, and then of course you would not use it among certain companies, right? If you're among children, you wouldn't use it. Among adults, you would use it. Same thing like any, I guess, profanity, any word like that. And knowing the historical, understanding the history of it, but still using it. And so there became that place where people were like, but wait, what are we doing to ourselves? How we're denigrating ourselves, right?
It's an old argument.
And yet, it's still an argument. I mean, there's still, you know, hip hop people are using it. It's just like, it's still in raps, you know, it's just like, I mean, we hear it all the time, even though we may not use it, but we hear it all the time. And then of course there are those moments where you may use it because it's apropos for the situation. It's like, you know, it is what it is. But the thing is, it's just like, it's a difficult conversation. It's because there are those whose parent, you know, you may say there are those who's like, you only have one parent who looks like they're Black, but it's just like, but what if you have both parents who look like they're Black, and you just happen to get that one gene, you know, you happen to get that, you happen of all the things, you're the one that came out looking in a particular way. But
you know those genes are hiding.
They're here, they're throwaway genes. Like we remember reading this article of they were from Africa, what country in Africa, and they had this white child, and they were like, what? Like two very dark skinned, and they were like, what is this? Whose child is this? And but the child looked like them, so it was just like, oh, this is a gene that just came out of no, you know, like came out of our sequential, you know, whatever. So what do you so in some respect, it's like if you grow up in a space where it's just like you don't see yourself other than because you see yourself through your parents' eyes and your family's eye, you know, and through those who are around you. I know we grew up in the 80s and 90s, so it's just like you know, it was just like we're here, we're all here thrown together. We know ourselves to be immigrants, we know ourselves to be you know, considered supposedly lower class or whatever, lower caste, and now of course there's this other awakening happening, but at the same time it's just like how do you tell somebody how you know, it's a difficult for us, it's difficult to, because one of the things, our sister is light skinned, and she was told by other people, you can't say you're Black, and it's just like,
well, I'm gonna jump
you know,
in
and it's like
that policing. There's a problem with that also. I'm not big on the policing part of it. So, okay, I'm also a child of the 80s and 90s. I remember when, you know, all the politicians were beefing with hip hop about the N-word and this, that. I grew up saying it constantly. All my boys said it. We all said it. It was just like, it was nothing.
I was like water.
Like, yeah, it was like whatever, right? Until, you know, I had this very experience with a racist police officer, and that really changed my mind about it. Seeing that word associated with, seeing that police officer use that word on me, and it be tied to the racist power structure that exists within policing, it shifted my mind state a little bit. But the policing of identity, one of the things I've heard people say is, I'm going to police what you decide to do with, you know, who you claim to be. I'm not going to police who you claim to be. So, you know, if you look like, I don't know, who's somebody we could say, like, if you look like Angelina Jolie, or you look like, I don't know, Jennifer Aniston or whatever, and you out here claiming Afro-Latinidad, and you getting paid to do gigs, and you're publishing books and this, okay, I'm a call you on that. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't see no Blackness anywhere. So what I'm gonna call is you exploiting Black people for your benefit. But, you know, there's chicks like Rachel Dolezal and La Otra, Krug, who was like fronting like she was Afro-Boricua forever and stuff. Right. That shit is just fraud. You know what I mean? 100%. Like, you can't even, we don't even have to talk about that. But like you said, I think for people who then, because what we don't want to do is engage in colorism as well. And it's a slippery slope once we begin to police our own descendencia the way that the West polices it. I don't have the answer, but I just know that sometimes, you know, I don't know. I don't want to mimic those behaviors, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So you're right, it's complicated. And again, I don't have the answer, but I always feel like we are diminishing ourselves when we get into those wars with each other. And we got to find a better way. But I don't have the answer for what that better way is, you know?
I mean, but it's 100. I mean, you have a son. You have someone who,
yeah.
you know, you have family. Like we have so interesting enough, our nieces and nephew from one of our sisters, and her ex-husband is Haitian, and they you know, they came out fair skinned, but they're straight up egg. You know, I'm literally like, you can't get any deeper from the island than that, you know, both sides. And, you know, it just happens that they got that gene, you know, and so clarito. And really one of them, you know, a couple of them could look like they're passed from like, you know, Turkish, and, you know, like there's like, or Serbia or something. Like there's all this intricate intermixing, you know, it's just kind of like, we're fascinated. We're always fascinated by, like, when we find out who is from, and we're like, wow, like, that's amazing. Even so, but there's that place, yes, of like that policing of, it's like you can't tell someone what their own identity is and their lived experience, you know, because we, like we said, we have this other friend, man, they came out light skinned, but whoo. You know, they open their mouth and they're like, you're like, they're black.
Yeah.
You know, like you could just, you know what I'm saying? Like they're red bone, but they black. I don't, you know, I don't care what nobody says. Like there are those who just are.
The racist superstructure, you know, it's this idea of the one drop rule, that was like a law, you know what I'm saying? Like this shit was real.
I mean, it's still on the books. I mean, it's still on the books here in the United States. It's not disappeared.
No, exactly. So, you know, this shit is real, man. Like, and so that being the case, we just don't know people's experiences with that. Like I worked with a gentleman, you know, this was like when I was like 18, and, you know, he was African-American, but he was very light skinned. He had green eyes. And I'll never forget, you know, I think he might've been like from Virginia or something, and he was living in Jersey. And the dude, his experiences with racism, you know, the stories he told me, he's like, you see me and you probably think I could pass. He goes, not in the South, I can't pass. And he would just break it down. And, you know, he was a Southern Black man. And even though he was very, very light skinned and had green eyes, he was like, racism is crazy. And he said, and he was caught in a situation where he was getting it from a lot of different sides, you know, from some Black people who were like, you're too, you know, you're not Black enough. And you know, we got it in the whole Afro diaspora. So again, it's a complex issue. And I think that we would do well to stay away from policing that. But I think it's totally fair to critique when people exploit what are realities for people of the African diaspora, realities, you know, for some kind of gain. And we see that a lot. You know, we see white girls trying to pretend to be Afro-Latinas all the time. And likewise, we see dudes trying to be ethnically ambiguous and shit, you know, to just make a dime. And it's like, you know, that shit we got to come for. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, as you said, this is much more. This is a much more another deep dive conversation that we could have.
Yes.
At definitely some later time in 2021, as the year is closing out. And for everyone who's watching, and for those who will be watching, you know, they can pick up your book. They can pick up Melancolía, right? That's available from Červená Barva Press, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can
Yep.
pick up Black Maybe and Afro Lyric. That's available from Willow Books.
Mm-hmm.
And then your new book is available for pre. It's still pre-order. No, pre-order.
No, it's out. It's out
It's
in the
out
world.
now.
You could find the books. You go to flowersongpress.com, or you could go to like small press distribution. You know, try to stay away from Amazon if you can. You know what I mean? Go to Bookshop if you can. You can get books through Bookshop. Yeah, definitely. Or if you go right to the publisher, that's great because you help independent presses. I think, which is so important. Please support small presses. They believe in the poet's work. You know, if you like the book, help them to bring more books like that into the world.
Yes, and sometimes you never know. Like they might be like, for instance, for Christmas or something, or holidays, they may be, you know, doing 20% or 10% off or something like that. So you never know what they may be happening at the same time, and that you are definitely, like you said, giving a small press, just like you have a small press, right? Like you have your nonprofit where you also, you know, if you want to go get fresh books, right, at your on your site, and your poets, and also we just want to let people know that if you like what you see and you feel that this is important, we have for ourselves a GoFundMe where we're asking people to support the work that we're doing, especially the work that we're doing in the Dominican Republic, and not only here but also we're creating. We really are out to create racial justice leaders, people who can completely alter the course of our political system in the Dominican Republic, you know, Haiti, and the Caribbean. Like, you don't know, like there are many people, like whatever work that we do, you don't know how it will transpire even here in the United States, right? Like inside of any work that any artist does. So we're asking people to donate to our GoFundMe and support the work that we're doing. Again, these are the books. These are the books that you can get. And we were so happy to have you be with us, Roberto. And we can't wait to have you be with us again. And maybe this time we would like to talk to you about this book. This book was we're like, yo, that wine, every poem had like a wine. I was like, you really were drinking. This thing should have like a wine, you know, like a little thing being like, you can buy a wine, a wine bottle from X. That could be like a great sponsorship for like this book. If you know, we're able to get back together again.
It's Melancolía, so you know the vino brings melancolía, right? I can't wait.
You were really going through it.
That's the title of the book. That's what it's about. You know, it's about that Western miasma. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you were really going through it. But one of the things that we wanted to ask you, was it inspired by like your sister's passing?
Which one? This one, Melancolía.
Yeah,
it's interesting. The poems made their way in there, and I had been writing those poems for many years. You know, my sister passed away in 2008, and so I had been working on those elegies for her for a long time. And it's just funny how you can see, if in this book, you can see traces of what would become this book. And then in this book, I think it kind of comes together. A lot of it comes together very beautifully. So it's funny because I wrote this book first, but it just needed more time. Yeah. And so I was sitting on this manuscript, just working on it and thinking about it and working on it when this book came to me. And so this one came out first, even though Black Maybe was the first book.
That's very interesting. You're right, because this one came out in 2016, and then this was in 2018, and then you have your book. But literally, you were sitting on this for
many years,
way before this.
Wow. Yep. Yeah.
That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah. You know, Black Maybe. it had a lot of different titles. Oh my God, so many titles. But then also I had to find a structure within which to it's not, I always say to tell that story. It's poems, but I often say I had to find a structure to tell that story. Because I recognize that it's our story, right? It's not just my story, it's our story. And so I had to find a structure that allowed the stories to become our story. And so that took a lot of time. That took a lot of time and listening, right? And finding how to listen, and to get to that point. So yeah. I'm glad it worked.
That is because this one, literally, when we were reading it, it literally reads like a story. Like it's not like the poem, it's like a chapter, like each chapter, but very, yeah, it just reads like a book. It doesn't read like individual poems. You could pick up this and be like, oh, this poem stands alone. This poem stands alone. This is this poem. This poem stands, or these poems can, be. We see the transition, but no, this reads like.
Yes.
Like it reads as if any other novel, any other fiction, nonfiction book. Like, oh yeah.
Gratitude.
Yeah, it was just like, it was just effortless. So, and we are really thankful and grateful.
Thank you.
Everybody pick up this book, and for those especially who grew up in New York City, New Jersey, and for inside of this kind of cultural bubble, it really was just like, oh, I'm back home. I'm back in the Bronx. Oh, I'm back. I'm here in Brooklyn. Like the experience of, and so we just really thank you for that ride, that joy, and also.
You mentioned that, and I just wanted to throw it out into the universe because this is how we manifest. That one of my goals is for all high school kids in New York City to have an opportunity to choose this book and put, from their reading list, to give teachers who are working with, to give our teachers who are working with our children, Black and brown children, right? Afro-descendientes, be they African-American, Afro-Caribbean, or Afro-Latino, the opportunity to read this book and find a path for themselves, right? To explore the richness that is Afrodescendencia, and to start looking for their own freedom, right? So anybody watching, if you know who that person I need to speak to is, hit it up so we can do that and get that done.
Absolutely. And we are connected to at least one school. We're connected to at least a couple of schools or one school where maybe we can ask them to look into doing that work. We that is all it's becoming real right now.
You see.
So we thank you so much, Roberto. Thank you so much for your time. And thank everyone who's out there, who's watching this, who will watch this, who's in conversation. Those are future descendants who will see this. And the first conversation that we were able to have with you officially, and of course this will be the first of many other iterations to come. And we thank you for our blessings and for your beautiful words, your beautiful words. And Sonia Sanchez, we had a friend of ours who said, Sonia Sanchez asked, where are all the poets? And so here we are. We're with a poet right here in front of us, Roberto, right? And why it's so important for the poets to be out here, listening to our ancestors and writing those things out, right? For us to really to hear those words that we need to hear, and to get connected back to ourselves. So we thank you for that work of that connection, that self-reflection, so that we are able to self-reflect as well. So thank you. Thank you.
All right, we'll build.
Good night, everyone.